Turn it up, it's your new groove, yeah. Riding waves in the digital blue, yeah. CDO times got that insight, yeah. For the execs in the tech light, yeah. Bridging gaps with every tune, play it. Sync your mind to the tech boom, slay it.
Welcome to another episode of Bytes of Brilliance. In today's episode, we dive deep into, I think, an important topic in the digital age, which is autonomous transformation, AI agents, and how AI and automation is rapidly changing the landscape of industries, how we ensure these advancements are aligned with human values and societal goals. So I'm especially thrilled to finally got Brian Evergreen to join me on this podcast. He's a true visionary in the space, and he's also the author of Autonomous Transformation, creating a more human future in the era of artificial intelligence. Brian has spent years at the forefront of AI and digital transformation, helping organizations navigate these complex waters while keeping humanity at the core. So again, happy to have you, Brian. Today, we're exploring some key themes of Brian's book. I've read his book, and it's quite eye-opening. And we also talk about some of the practical frameworks for leaders and uncovering how we can all prepare for a future where AI and automation are part of our daily lives. So maybe to get things started, Brian, your book emphasizes a human-centric approach to AI and automation. It's really like HI and AI is equals something greater, right? So can you share some details with our listeners? What motivated you to write this book and how you see autonomous transformation impacting industries in the next decade?
Okay. Yes, I can absolutely do that. So in terms of what motivated me, I felt like there was an era of transformation coming beyond digital transformation, like you mentioned. And I started writing about it a little bit because I thought, okay, I don't know that everyone sees what's coming. This is back in 2022. And I thought, okay, people don't necessarily see the amount of transformation that's on the way. Oh, I'm sorry, 2021. And then I started posting and thinking, okay, the work that I've been doing with Fortune 500 C-level executives, obviously they get access to those ideas and I'm sharing that with them. I thought I want more people to know because, we need to figure this out together as a society. And so I started posting about that. And then Wiley reached out and said, hey, would you actually like to write a book about that? And so that sort of validated the intention that I had to sort of share, hopefully, valuable insights with people. And then by the process of agreeing to write that book for them, I thought, well, I could use this as a forcing function for me to try to answer some of the questions that I just keep running into, or some of the walls we keep running into as organizational leaders. When I was working in AI strategy for Microsoft with these Fortune 500 C-level teams on how are we going to transform our industry? How are we going to create new growth categories with AI? We kept running into the same problems. And it wasn't because there weren't all the smartest people in the room. We had really smart people in the room. And it wasn't because they weren't working hard enough. It certainly wasn't because they didn't have enough capital. So what I came to was, it's actually the system that we were using that was broken, not the people. And so I thought, okay, we need to challenge and fundamentally, revisit the system that we're using. And part of that is one piece of it that I found, kind of moving into your second half of the question, is that by treating organizations like mechanical machines and people like cogs in that machine is one of the things that's holding back innovation and holding back the ability to apply AI. So it was funny because based on my ethos and my background as, I used to be a musician and I care very much about people. And so based on my background,
Another thing we share.
What'd you say?
Another thing we share.
That's right. Yes, exactly. And so because of that, I thought, okay, I'm going to try to help people understand how to use AI and then do my best to convince them that they should be aiming at a better future for humanity when they do that. And then I realized, as I did my research and writing, I realized, oh, actually, the two are, you can't separate them. You can't say, I'm just going to use AI to raise a profit, and then later I'll figure out how to lead in a more human way. the 87% of AI projects fail. One of the biggest characteristics is that breaks them down is not that the technology doesn't work, because it is working for many companies. It's not that there isn't enough money spent. It's that it's social problems. It's issues between people and between organizations and political decisions that are being made. And so I thought, okay, that's kind of a delightful thing to discover, because it already aligned with what I would have wanted from a values perspective. But then I realized there's an actual fiscal, practical need for organizations to really double down on treating people better and managing their organization like it is a social system if they want to get the value out of AI.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I should probably offline, share with you some examples of how I used AI to simulate a singer on one of my songs. So,
oh, awesome! Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Super realistic, so I'm a little bit proud of it. Yeah, what you mentioned, right? Is we are. This doesn't necessarily only apply to artificial intelligence, but also to any type of automation or using technology, right? How can you, complement the work? How can you enrich people's lives and create new opportunities, right? Of course, with many of technology initiatives, there's always an aspect of automation and rationalizing and streamlining, but then there's also opportunities that come with it. So are there some examples that you've seen where AI is truly complementing human skills, maybe even in innovative ways that we haven't thought of yet?
There are. I have to be careful on some of my favorite ones are things I can't really share, but I'll speak in broad terms and say that if you think about, so one thing I'll say just as an overall response to your question or your remarks is in the bad example, which is and McDonald's, when they were experimenting, they were trying something new, seeing would people prefer to have a more efficient process of going through our drive-through and not interacting with humans, right?
Yeah.
That's an example of applying AI, and it was an experiment.
Right.
And it turns out, no, people did not like that. They railed against it. And so, so now they've ended the project. They've ended the experiment.
Yeah.
That's an example, right? Obviously of trying something and realizing, okay, people want to interact with people. Where at moments that matter within the organization, but in the touch point between people and the consumer and the company. And then I think on the other hand, you have, things that have worked really well in terms of augmenting, like for instance, if I am trying to get a great example of something that I wish existed is when I want to call an Uber, I would love to just speak to my phone and say, hey, I need to get an Uber to the airport. And, my phone just say, like, right now, are you ready to go? And, oh no, I'll be ready to go in 15 minutes. So if you could, aim for a car, if there's no cars that are available that, that would be here in 15, if they would need to take 15 minutes to get here, please book it now and let's get started. But if they're already, already close by, then wait for about 14 minutes and then book it. Right. That's something that from an intelligence perspective, we should already have that would just be helpful and useful, and it wouldn't make any change. There's no person that's currently, the person that's doing that right now is me. I'm the one typing it, right? And if you think about that, if you expand that across every sector, across every task that we do inside of organizations, there are so many that AI is already and can continue to make easier and make more efficient. And then something that I've been talking about a little bit that I'm really excited about that is I certainly can say that there are organizations working toward this future is I describe it as AI agents are going to build a new internet. And so where 2D chess is trying to create AI agents that navigate the existing internet and learn what menus are and all that kind of stuff, I think 3D chess is just bypassing the existing form of the internet, aside from APIs, which are obviously part of the existing internet, but and having agent to agent communications. And so and taking on tasks that right now humans can't actually do. So an example that I always share is that, like, let's say you and I were both in construction and we needed wood. that we need the same wood, but let's say you worked in New York and I work in Seattle. And I call up Acme Lumber and I say, hey, I need some wood in Seattle. And they say, oh, well, let's check our database of where our wood's located. Okay, we have that kind of wood at that quantity out of New York. So we're going to draw up a work order for you. You're going to pay extra to have it driven across the US. You're going to wait, et cetera, et cetera. And then you call ABC Lumber and they say, oh, well, let's check our inventory. Oh, we have some in Seattle that we're going to drive all the way across the country to you. So we have two sets of lumber traveling all the way across the country.
Yeah.
That's carbon waste. That's waste of money, waste of time. It's impacting the human experience of those drivers that are driving, all the way across the country and going away from their families. So, but right now it would not make sense for those lumber companies to quick double check with all the other lumber companies that exist in their inventory. It would be way too time intensive. But in the agentic world, if you have agents interacting with each other in a matter of milliseconds, they can actually interact and say, if I've already placed my first order and it's booked, but then you make your call and my order is, set to leave tomorrow, let's say, you make your call and ABC Lumber, sends out a request to all the agents across the lumber network. And then one of the other ones gets back and go, oh, actually, we have some in New York that we were about to ship to Seattle. We have some about to ship to Seattle. And then ABC says, well, we have some in Seattle that we would have needed to ship to New York. And at that point, you and I don't care who's fulfilling our order. We just need the product in the best pricing and the best timing at the right quality. And so they could trade customers behind the scenes without us even necessarily knowing or caring. And now we're saving money, less impact to the planet, saving time. And so if you scale that across every industry and think about all the things we're not already doing as people, because it's not even in the realm of possibilities, there's so much more value that can be created that I'm really excited about.
And it's potentially I was just thinking some of that exists, like if you have an SAP, a Reba or Jaeger or whatever, right? That is procurement platform, but we as people don't necessarily have access to that. So we would place an order, we could take advantage of something that only large companies currently can do in a more automated way and more intuitive way, right? That makes a lot of sense. With that being said, right, and of course, if you order like an Uber or whatever, I would think it's a robo taxi, right? So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, with a Waymo or whatever. I've ridden in a Waymo. It's pretty great.
Okay. I would be a little bit scared of that, but I mean, you get used to anything, I guess.
Yeah.
But,
the thing I'm worried about with things like Waymo is the possibility for human harm. And I don't mean this as anything about Waymo or their strategy, but if all of our cars are automated and someone can figure out how to hack into them, right? That's a very scary scenario.
I a while ago, there was a scenario where somebody drew some lines on the street that were like leading off the road and tricked some of the system, right?
Yeah,
it's scary. But on a more positive thought.
It's tools and weapons, right? As Brad Smith from Microsoft, wrote about and talks about is, when we built a hammer, when we create a hammer as humans, right? It's a tool, but it can also be used as a weapon. And I think we have to be aware of that and responsible in how we think about these things. For me, I focus on, in the work that I do in strategy and working with executives, that obviously they need to take a lens on how we're going to protect our company, our employees, and our consumers and our customers from the potential for, this being used inappropriately or for harm. But the main focus that I think I generally have is how are we going to use this to create more good and create more value in society? And there's so much there. And so that's, I think there's others that their expertise is defending from harm, and I'm very grateful for them.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually, there's obviously this debate, and you see that even like where companies in America are really taking advantage of this new capabilities of the AI technology, and you have Europe, Germany, where I grew up in, where you have a lot stricter regulations that probably could hinder some of the innovations, right? So it's always that
Yeah.
that balancing act on how to find that and you know, I think we need regulation, we need controls, but we also need to enable the entrepreneurial spirit and innovation. And I think that's something that we're really good here in America, and I can say that now as an American because I'm you're a citizen now, so since
Nice. Congratulations. Yeah.
thank you. So, that when you look at kind of the jobs, how they are evolving, you know, what are some skills that, I mean, I asked that, I think about folks, corporations, even thinking about my kids, you know, what should you focus on skills to develop and that are still remain relevant in an AI-driven world?
So I'm going to start with a playful answer, which is music theory and composition, because that's what I studied. No, in a way, yes, and in a way, no. Obviously, I don't think there's one degree that everyone should just hone in on and focus on. I think that would be problematic for a number of reasons. I think if anything, I think I would focus less on. I think people can go into whatever disciplines or fields that they've always dreamed of or that they find interesting, like they always have. And I think the difference between where we're headed versus where we've been is that the level of complexity is going to continue to increase. So I think increasing your skill of dealing with complexity, of understanding and sort of embracing paradox, and of ideating and envisioning and abstracting across different layers of complexity and zooming out and zooming back in. To me, if I could, you know, if there were one thing I think every college student needs to make sure they're able to do before they graduate, it would be that. Because I think our society is already so complex that the systems that we've been using to try to manage and build and invest and you know, keep creating value against the complexities of the 20th century are really breaking down as we move into the 21st century. And it's only going to get more complex, which means we need to be even better at dealing with complexity. So to me, that's the biggest. I don't think it's just don't do software engineering or don't bother becoming a data scientist. I think we're going to need, just like we still need radiologists, despite some remarks that were made, I think 8 years ago or something like that. I think we're absolutely still going to need software engineers, but I think their role will transform. I think that But I think that the ability to write software, the ability to review code that's being created by agents will absolutely be important. And so I think we still need folks across all disciplines. And I think one of the most fundamental changes in skill increases that people will need is being able to deal with a greater degree of complexity.
Right, right. And I think it is also probably an opportunity for folks to break into certain jobs that, you know, talk about coding, right? When you use some of the models, they're starting to get pretty good by just describing what you want to do and iterating on it, right? So I'm experimenting with that a little bit myself right now. It's fascinating.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. And I think that, you know, the first thing it makes me think of is, okay, so are we going to move into a world where I can even say, if I don't like the user experience, like is every company going to become an API where if I don't like the user experience of Uber's app, like what I just described to you, if I could get Claude or whatever platform, I'm not trying to, you know, recommend a specific one. If I could get an agent building platform, you know, agent that will build me software on the fly, and I can say, oh, I don't really like the way that, you know, Uber does this or that. I wish it did this other thing. And from an API perspective, that would be supported. Or if it's just on the front end that it's not possible, but I could make it possible by, you know, like the thing I just described, if we had control over a front end that talked to Uber, we could totally lag and time our when it makes the actual request for the car. Right. So that's where my head goes, is like, that's an example of thinking through the levels of complexity and abstracting and thinking, oh, okay, so then what would that look like? And how would Uber, you know, they'd still make money the same way, but now I'd have this agent layer where, and theoretically I could build, you know, without necessarily even being technical, I could have the ability to re-engineer my own interfaces between me and every brand that I buy from or whatever, I think that's super interesting, but that's thinking through those levels of complexity like I described.
Right, right. No, that's super interesting, and something that I always think about for my organization, CDO Times, right? How can I leverage some of those integrations and make it easier to consume content and make it engaging, right? And leverage the latest technologies and add new functionalities, right? And if I could have a couple of bots that would, interact for me and do a lot of that work that I can, with human in the loop, of course, making sure that it all works, but that would be a great enabler. So for leaders that are just beginning their journey in AI and autonomous transformation, what advice would you give them to ensure their efforts are, successful, but then also aligned with that broader purpose? That sometimes, even if you want to do it, let's be honest, like you have your short-term 3-year, 1-year plan, right? And the broader purpose of the 3-year, 5-year goals, even though aspirational, how do you keep that aligned with that and tie that back in?
Great question. So the first thing I always do is say that, it's our job as leaders. People aren't going to come up with visions for us and for our company. Even if we just start with customer problems, usually it's very rare that you'll find a customer submitting a vision for the future of the way your product works that would really open up a new growth market for you, right? That's pretty rare. It needs to come from you. And so I think every leader needs to focus on their own ability in developing the skill of envisioning the same way you develop the skill of software engineering or anything else, is through practice. And so I sort of have I call it a ninedrant, because it's not a quadrant. There's 9 of them, but I'm not sure the Latin word for 9. So you probably know, because you take Latin in Germany, right?
I opted for French, France, and French, but I'm a little.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
I was forced to study some.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. So, but I call it a ninedrant because I just haven't bothered to look up the Latin. But anyway, where the rows are, there's 3 rows that are not ambitious enough, bold and achievable, or too ambitious, and then there's 3 columns, which are achievable within my department or team, achievable with my organization with consensus, or achievable in my industry with coalition. And I think a lot of times as leaders, we focus in on things that are not ambitious enough, or we talk about things that are way too ambitious. And we talk about things either that are all within our control and we don't even need anyone else's help for that, which will generally mean, just making small incremental improvements, but never really, transforming the organization or the value you bring. Or we talk a lot about things that would take a whole industry coalition to achieve, and then we get frozen by how complicated that is, and we do nothing. And so what I recommend is having a portfolio of visions across all, in the middle of the bold and achievable part, that are across things that are achievable within your team and department, that you already have control over or can get approval for pretty quickly. Things that would be achievable within your organization with consensus, your broader organization, and things that would be achievable within your industry with coalition. That's the thing I usually recommend starting with, is making sure, and you could even start with what you already have. You could say, why don't we just take all the things we're already working toward and imagine if we achieve all those, what vision or what future will we have arrived at? Or you could do it the other way around, where you start with a vision of the future. Like if you've declared you're going to be carbon neutral by 2030, you could say, okay, if that's the future, what are all the initiatives we're working toward? If we achieve all these initiatives, how close will we be? And what are the missing links that would be between here and that goal? That's the first thing. The second thing I always tell organizations is forget about AI when you're starting the conversation about AI. Because it shouldn't be, and you've probably heard me say this, Karsten, you wouldn't start a remodel. If you said, I want to do a remodel for my home, and I said, oh, well, my dad was a general contractor, which is true, by the way. And so I'll help you with that. And I showed up at your house with a tool belt on, and I had a hammer and I had a saw, and I said, all right, let's get to work. You'd be like, what are you talking about? And I said, no, let's walk around the house. Let's show me, let's find some ways that I could use this hammer to make your house better. And that would be crazy. We would never do that. And so instead, starting with a vision of, oh, I want more counter space, or I want a bigger shower, or whatever, And then saying, okay, well, if I need that, what are all the things that would have to be true? We would have to meet the standard safety codes. We can't remove a load-bearing wall, et cetera, right? You design, you architect, you figure out the cost. You make sure that if you have to check in with the city, that you get that cleared. And then at the very end, people bring tools to bring it to life. And so I always tell organizational leaders, don't fall in the trap of picking up the AI tool and looking around your organization for how you're going to make it better. Instead, set all tooling aside and think, okay, based on our organization's core competencies, based on our customers, based on our footprint, what kind of value are we bringing that people enjoy and rely on? What kind of new value could we potentially, whether it's something building on an existing product, or is there something else, another type of customer problem or need that we could solve? And then what would have to be true for us to create that? And it might end up being that AI is one of the things you need to create that new value. Right. But I sometimes joke that it might also be that you need an analog transformation where people really just wish they could reach a human the first time they called in for customer support, right? So I think starting with the value you're going to create is really critical, because if you aren't doing that and you're just picking up the AI tool, even if you can somehow justify, oh, this could present 3% productivity improvement, you're not likely for people to be as bought in, and therefore it's much less likely for it to be successful as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and that reminds me of the Lawler model. I took a MIT product design course, probably a lot aligned with some of the things that you were talking about, where you're really looking at what is a good use case, what are you trying to, what's the business case, or what are the things that where you have a challenge, right? And then you narrow down, and certain things are a good case for AI and others are not, to your point, right? And there's obviously AI has been around for a little bit now, where leveraging technology to sift through massive amounts of data and finding the correlations and bringing it all together is great. But then you also have to consider what happens if you train on the wrong data, right? And use the right, we're everybody, when we're talking AI, everybody's talking about generative AI, ChatGPT these days, but there's obviously all different kinds of algorithms that you can look at, and multimodal AI capabilities that these agents that you talked about will surely make use of, right? But so I think that's where we can also help as practitioners or folks that have done a couple of those initiatives to see where could it fit, and thinking it completely through, like all the way to bias and how do you operationalize it and how do you monitor the environments, and maybe you have everything right, but then you're testing it out. It's like, oh, this is very expensive. So now I need ML ops and monitor what's going on, right? So I could talk about this forever and ever.
Of course.
But I think obviously with your book, you're talking about frameworks. So you talked about some of them. Is that I think that was one of the things that you highlight? Is there anything else that leaders can use to test the waters a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that another thing I would recommend is stop trying to be data driven. And I know also
stop being data driven. Oh my God, my whole world is colliding.
I'm sorry, Carsten, you need to stop. You have to stop being data driven. I'll tell you why. The data driven, at least in decision making, right? Not the idea of data informed, but being data driven in decision making, in theory, sounds like it's going to be very scientific, because there's data, and in science we collect data, right? Yeah. But in practice, what it's become is, so let's start with a scientific method, right? You make an observation or ask a question, you form hypotheses, you conduct experiments, you analyze the results of those experiments, and then you draw a conclusion, right? But in most organizational decision making today, we make an observation or ask questions, check, okay, that's the same. We form hypotheses, check, that's the same too.
Mhm.
Then we gather data from stuff we've already done or stuff we found in Gartner or IDC. Okay, that's different. Then we analyze the results of that data, and then based on the results of that data, we draw a conclusion, which is the investment decision.
Mhm.
And then at the very end, we conduct the experiment. But instead of treating it like an experiment, we say, we prove in advance how long this is going to take, how much it's going to cost, and we're going to tie your performance to it,
Okay.
which is fundamentally unscientific. If we went
Right.
about that process for any field of science, like let's say cancer research, imagine, right? We would not be we would have no hope of finding a cure.
Right.
And so I think
CRISPR
that,
would have not been invented that way.
What'd you say?
CRISPR would have not been invented that way.
Yeah, there's so much there. The iPhone wouldn't have been invested in because the data justified not investing in the smartphone market, because General Magic had failed less than a decade ago. The smartphone TAM, according to research, was abysmal. And so there, he went against the data and made what I call a reason-driven decision, where yes, you can account for the data. I'm not saying data isn't useful, but reason, I would argue, is even more useful when empowered with data. And so sometimes you can be really gutsy and say, despite all the data telling me I shouldn't do this, I think I'm right, which I did with NFTs, right? I don't know if you did, Karsten, but a lot of people invested in NFTs because the data said that you should. I thought, I'm just not seeing it. And so I did not invest in NFTs. And boy, am I glad I didn't, right? So that I would argue that the data-driven decision would have been to invest in NFTs. The reason-driven decision was to not invest in NFTs. And so a lot of people have already, who are listening to this, have probably already made at least one reason decision, probably many, many more than one reason-driven decision in your life.
Is this maybe one challenge to your approach is that
bring it on, let's go.
NFTs, if you're an artist, right, or a musician, it's another source of income stream to like enable somebody to own that music piece, and then as it grows value, it can resell it, right? That's I find that part fascinating, but the whole, I don't want to offend anybody, but the whatever.
Yeah, no, I hear
stuff. I think that never really made.
I mean, no scourge on anyone. I just, for people that I think it's a good recent example where everywhere you looked, people were saying, get in on NFTs now. This is the time. And then you see the market for NFTs drop down to basically zero, right? And so a lot of people have now lost millions of dollars that they had invested. And so that's all I mean. And I definitely certainly I don't mean to offend anyone, but so in terms of decision making, I thought, okay, I didn't just start by outlining the problem. Obviously, I started there, but I didn't end there, because it's not enough to tell people, hey, you're making decisions wrong, but have a good day, right? You need to give them something else. And so I thought, well, what would have to be true for the way that we make decisions to systemically be better than the data-driven methodology? And I've already mentioned the name of it, the reason-driven decision making. And I created a framework that you would have seen in the book, which is once you've gone through that process I described before of picking a future that you want to solve for or a goal you want to achieve, then asking what would have to be true for us to achieve this. And the first layer of answers to that question are usually your theories. And the next layer are all your hypotheses. And you keep asking what would have to be true till you get back to the point of today where all those things are already true today. And then okay, the gap between the things that are already true and the things that are not yet true that would have to be true, that's our line of investment to get to the goal that we want to create. But more often than not today in organizations, you might set a goal, and then without writing down all the things that would have to be true, all the unknowables, we sort of, OKR process, for example, is like, we have an objective. Here's 3 actions we're going to take that we think will generally move us in that direction. But there's a huge gap because they might not move you in that direction at all, or they might move you a little bit, but there might be a huge gap left of other things that are actually maybe even more important to do. And then no criticism on OKRs either, because I think it was better than what came before OKRs. But instead being able to say, document all the unknown, and then say, okay, all of these different theories and hypotheses, maybe a whole branch of them is something that NIST recently released funding for from a research perspective. So we're going to just monitor that and see if that can be proven true or false. Whereas this other thing over here, that's core competency to us, and we can't find anyone talking about in the market. And so if we got there first, that could be a huge differentiator. We could even commercialize on that, right? And so having that kind of all up, and then two other main benefits is, one is when you're working with your leadership team, when you're trying to get your budget, budget approval for the year of the things you want to invest in, instead of it being, okay, these are my numbers. At this point, decision making is, here's my numbers, here's your numbers, whose numbers are better. Wait, how did you do your homework? Let's argue about math. Instead of what I think is our best skill as humans, which is reasoning and logic. And so saying, okay, we agree in the future. And you might say, I don't like the profitability of that, Brian. I don't think we should do that. And I can say, okay, if we agree on the future we're trying to create and the things that would have to be true, this is one of the things that would have to be true that I'm proposing we solve for. So I hear you that you don't like the profitability, but I'm going to need you to help me to come up maybe with another way then that we can still prove or disprove this hypothesis. And now it's you and me versus the problem instead of you versus me. And then the second thing that it really changes is it bakes why and it bakes meaning back into the work at the strategy level. So when joining an organization today, the status quo we're used to is, welcome to our organization. Here's the initiatives we're working on. Here's your work stream. Here's a bunch of tasks. Here's the next milestone. That's fair. We're used to it. But instead, it would be, welcome to our organization. This is the future that we're solving for. And these are the things that would have to be true. And we need your help here. So not only are you more like interested, but then also what you're working toward, even if you have no control over what theories and hypotheses people have come up with, or even if you're at the most junior level, you still feel like you're a part of it in a way that I think is really powerful.
No, that's quite interesting, and many times, at least in my experience when I came in to change organization in a positive way, right? And I think this could be a great tool in general, AI or not AI, right? But to
exactly
look at how do you reinvent an organization? How do you bring people along? From a change management approach. How do you create engagement? So no, it's really cool. Probably need to do another podcast about that topic.
I'd be happy to. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And then, and the thing I've been working on the most with organizations and in some of the resources that I've been creating. So
okay, no, that's cool. So as we look into the future, which we both obviously like to do, is what emerging trends are out there in AI, autonomous technology that you're most excited about, and how do you think that will shape the world over the next 5-10 years? Will we have artificial general intelligence? Will we all upload ourselves into the internet or whatever, the ether?
That I mean, I don't, at this point, I do not see us on a path to AGI. Well, it depends. I mean, how do you define AGI? Because it seems like the definition keeps changing. And so I think that based on, if you define AGI as AI that's as capable as a human in any task, I don't think that we're on track to that. I think that in any near future, based on at least the ways that we're currently solving for that. I think that, I'm sure, I mean, wouldn't you agree? As you're a technologist.
It's always fascinating to look at all the different projections. You have some very prominent, leaders.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like 5 years.
So it's, and the amount of innovation has accelerated significantly, right? There's so many things, at least it feels like it. There's all these innovations coming out. It's that's why I have a magazine, so I can keep people up to date, because so you can't, as a
it's happening fast,
focus on everything, right? And even I can't keep up with everything.
Well, I will hopefully comfort you with a reminder of our recent history as a society in obsession with the metaverse, and how I think a lot of us were thinking, oh my gosh, is the Gen Z and are these other generations going to go all in on the metaverse? And are we headed toward a WALL-E like future? If you've seen WALL-E, the Pixar movie, where people are just, sitting in front of a computer, they're just dialed in, or like Ready Player One, right? Where it's like dystopian and everyone's just in the metaverse and no one's interacting in real life anymore. I was genuinely worried about that a few years ago. I thought, if this really takes off, like our society is going to crumble. And But of course, and if you read all the news and you looked at all the hype that was going on, that's where it seemed like it was headed. I think it's the same thing with AI. I think that the speed at which the news comes out about every little thing that happens in the AI world is rapid. And it makes it all seem like everything's progressing so fast. But if you look at the actual capabilities that are being released or the announcements, a lot of them are that funding has happened, which doesn't mean any advancement has taken place. Like the one we saw this week, right? The $1 billion investment. That doesn't mean that they have made an advancement. Maybe they will. That's a lot of funding, but they haven't yet. And or if you look at the movie to AI capabilities that everyone started, going, oh my gosh, look at what Runway's doing, or look at what all these other ones are doing. This is going to change everything about movies, right? And if you look at all of those different ones, they're all pretty similar level, right? There's some that are slightly better, but none of them are even close to something where you could actually imagine it making a feature film. I mean, you could imagine, of course, we have great imaginations, but we're not actually that as close as I think it's hyped to be. And so what I would say is that we fall prey to the slippery slope fallacy, where we say the fact that I can see an advancement that goes a step in this direction means that I can imagine, and so therefore it's very likely we're just going to slip right down that slope into that future. And when the reality is that I think it's, instead of being an exponential growth rate the way that I think we imagine, because it's much more likely to be an S curve, and the way that human growth is. I shared earlier today on a different conversation about how in ChatGPT, I asked it, I said, hey, ChatGPT, my son is 5 years old. This is how tall he was when he was born. This is how much he's grown each year. How tall is he going to be when he's 18? Because I was kind of curious if it was going to just apply the math blindly or account for the S curve. It, of course, did not account for the S curve. And I think he's going to be something like 18 feet or something. It's obviously not going to happen, right? But that's, I think, the way that people tend to think about any type of hype cycle, like metaverse or AI in general, is that it's going to follow the same trajectory, because we have 3 data points here that look like a line. So let's just keep going up with that line, when really it's much more likely to be an S curve.
Yeah, and I think there's even other limitations. Even if everything is working as projected, we're going to run out of energy. We're going to run out of compute. Right? There's going to be all these things. I think the chip hasn't been built yet to really support like the growth in the usage. So if anything, that will probably be a limitation. But
it will.
Sorry.
No.
Me to interrupt you. So I guess right now I think it's a good time to do something that I always like to do in my podcast, which is just fire out a rapid round of questions, and just you answer whatever comes into your mind. And so let me know. Are you ready?
Yeah, of course.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. We talked a little bit about it already, but what's an AI, or what the one AI tool or application that you find yourself using the most these days?
ChatGPT. Probably the main way I use it is for DALL-E 3 to create images for my newsletter, and sometimes as a thesaurus when I'm working on and I'm trying to think of. I know I have a word in my mind and I can't seem to think of it because it's late or something, and I'll describe to ChatGPT. I'll say, what are 15 different words I could plug into this gap in my sentence, and then I'll see, okay, good, it's the third one down or whatever. So yeah.
Nice. What's the biggest myth about AI that you think needs debunking?
The biggest myth about AI that I think needs debunking is that AI is all about data, when really AI is about expertise. It's a pursuit of recreating expertise with systems, and data is one of the components that you might not even need to start with, because we can generate our own data depending on which method we're using, which I know you know very well. So I think that starting with your data to try to determine what AI you should build is the wrong approach. Starting with what value you want to create, what expertise do you have, and thinking, okay, what would we need to do to translate that to machine language is the right approach.
Very interesting. Besides your own book, of course, what's one book that every executive should read about digital transformation?
That's a great question. Well, I have some friends that have written some books that have come out recently, but I haven't had a chance to read them yet. So I only want to recommend books that I've actually read. Let's see, about digital transformation. Well, I mean, I think that this book is not about digital transformation, but I think that every person should read it, which is Data Story by Nancy Duarte. And it's about telling stories about your data and what a critical role storytelling plays. And I think that so many times when I've seen the best visions and the best ideas fail, it's because of the lack of an ability to articulate them in a way that's compelling. And so Nancy Duarte has advised, she and her company advised Steve Jobs on all of his presentations, or not all, but many. And she's absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't seen her TED Talk, The Secret Structure of Great Talks, she's phenomenal. And so I'd say that her book Data Story is the one I would recommend.
Nice. Which leader in the world or of tech or even beyond inspires you the most right now, and why?
A year ago, I would have said Satya Nadella, for a number of reasons that probably everyone already knows, right? He 10x'd Microsoft's size. He truly reinvented the company and its culture as well, which is just unbelievable. But because that's probably a very expected answer from a former Microsoft employee, I'll provide a different one, which is Amy Edmondson is someone that I love her work. She wrote the top business book of last year, The Right Kind of Wrong. And just the way that she, frankly, as someone who's trying to take complex things and distill them down for people, to be able to receive not because of their ability to handle complexity, but because of how much limited time they have to be exposed to an idea and actually, hear the nugget of information I'm trying to give them and then process it and maybe do something. Her ability to do that which granted she has many years as a Harvard professor, so she's honed it over time. But she's absolutely phenomenal. And big fan of her work.
Nice. I have to check that out too. Do you have a personal mantra or philosophy that guides your work and life?
Ooh, a couple. There's this one and I'm forgetting who it's attributed to. There's one I'm forgetting. I'll just say that the quotation, which is mortal, drawn from eternal life for this short time, think how precious these moments are. And that's probably the most universal, that, when I'm with my 3 and 5-year-old, or when I'm at work, or I want to make use of my time. I don't want to be endlessly scrolling, and I don't want to just be entertained. I want to be doing something that will be useful to someone. That's probably that. Yeah, there's several more, but that's probably the one that's stuck with me for decades now.
Yeah, no, that resonates with me too. And we recently went through a loss of my father 2 years ago, but it still hurts. But one thing I've learned there is that life is like a checkbook, right? And you got to make deposit to later on withdraw from them. And that can be spiritual, can be physical, intellectual. So you got to make those deposits with your family, with your friends, and so they can withdraw from it. So kind of the mortal aspect of things, like, it's so important to live in the moment. So I love that.
Yeah.
The future in one word, if you could describe the future of AI in one word, what would it be?
Future of AI in one word, I would say the first word that came to mind is complex, which feels like a cop-out. So I want to think of a better word. Surprising. I think that we think we know where it's headed and what it's going to be like, but I think we're going to be surprised and hopefully delighted by how it turns out.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good summary and outlook. Brian, this has been truly a masterclass, right? Just looking behind the curtain and seeing your thoughts that you put into your book and how you help clients and how we can leverage technology and AI specifically to maybe make life better. And I learned that I don't want to be data driven anymore. Anyway, so but for listeners, please make sure to pick up a copy of Brian's book, Autonomous Transformation. And you can read up on some of the things that he's discussed here. And of course, as always, please subscribe to Bytes of Brilliance for more insights on the digital boardroom that are special lessons learned from executives like Brian. So stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, keep on innovating and drive your digital strategy forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Riding waves
Thank you so much
in
for
the
having me.
digital blue, yeah. CDO times got that insight, yeah. For the execs in the tech light, yeah. Bridging gaps with every tune, play it. Sync your mind to the tech boom, slay it.